I locked the door the same way I always did, turning the key until I felt the familiar resistance, then just a little more until it stopped. The sound was quiet, softer than I remembered. Or maybe the store itself had learned how to be quiet over the years. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary, my hand still on the handle, listening to nothing in particular. I opened this store when I was 18. Back then, I didn't think much about endings. Everything felt temporary in a good way, like things could always be adjusted, fixed, or improved later. I remember standing in this same spot on the first day, the door unlocked, the lights too bright, the shelves too empty. I remember thinking that it would feel different once people came in. I thought the store would feel alive once it was used. Over time, it did. Not all at once, and not in the way I imagined. It didn't become loud or exciting, it became familiar. The floor learned the sound of footsteps, the counter learned the shape of my elbows, the register learned the rhythm of my hands. Even the air inside the store changed, holding the faint mix of cardboard, dust, and whatever season was happening outside. At 18, I didn't know how much of myself I was placing here. I thought I was just opening a store. I thought it was temporary, something I would outgrow or replace. I didn't realize I was building a routine that would quietly grow around me, day after day, year after year. The sign outside was the first thing I paid for. I remember that clearly. I couldn't afford much back then, but I wanted the sign to look solid, like it belonged. I stood across the street while they installed it, watching them bolt it into place. The letters looked larger from a distance, steadier. I told myself that if the sign looked real, then the business would become real too. People learned the sign before they learned me. Some of them never learned my name. They would say things like, "I'll stop by your place," or "I'll meet you near that shop with the sign." The sign became a landmark in a small way. It pointed to something that stayed, even as other things changed. I didn't think much about the sign while I was running the store. It was just there, above me, doing its job. It faded a little each year. The sun pulled the colour out slowly, patiently. One of the lights stopped working and I never replaced it. I always meant to, but it never felt urgent. Most days were ordinary. That's what I remember the most. Unlocking the door in the morning, turning on the lights, straightening things that didn't need straightening, waiting, helping someone, waiting again. There were days when no one came in at all, and days when people came in just to talk, even if they didn't buy anything. I learned how to tell the difference between someone who wanted help and someone who just needed a few quiet minutes somewhere that wasn't home. As I got older, the store stayed mostly the same. I changed, but slowly, in ways that were hard to notice at first. I learned how to stand longer without shifting my weight. I learned how to answer the same questions with the same calm tone, even when I was tired. I learned how to pretend that slow days didn't bother me. There were moments when I thought about closing before now. Usually late in the evening, after a long day, when the store felt too still. I would look around and imagine the shelves empty, the lights off for good. The thought always passed. There was always another morning, another delivery, another reason to wait. This time, it was different. There was no rush to decide, and no single moment that forced it. Things just became quieter. Fewer people came in. Some faces disappeared and didn't come back. Others would stop by and say things like, "I didn't know you were still open," and I would smile and say that I was. I didn't tell many people when I decided to close. It didn't feel like news. It felt like something that had already happened slowly, over time. I put up a small notice near the register. A few people read it and nodded. A couple of them said they would miss the place. One person asked what I would do next. I told them I wasn't sure. On the last day, I didn't do anything special. I opened at the usual time. I went through the same motions. A few customers came in, spaced far apart. We talked about ordinary things, the weather, traffic, nothing that needed to be remembered. When the day ended, I didn't rush. I cleaned the counter carefully, more carefully than usual. I wiped down the shelves even though they were already clean. I moved slowly, not because I was sad, but because there was no reason to hurry anymore. The store looked different without items on the shelves. Bigger, emptier. It echoed slightly when I walked. I noticed sounds I hadn't heard before, like the faint hum of electricity and the distant noise of cars outside. I turned off the lights one by one. Each switch made a small sound. The last light took a second longer to go out, flickering before settling into darkness. I stood there, letting my eyes adjust, feeling the shape of the room without seeing it. Before I left, I looked up at the ceiling, then at the front windows, and finally at the door. I tried to remember the first time I locked it. I couldn't. That memory had blended into all the others. Outside, the air felt cooler. The street looked the same as it always had. Cars passed. Someone walked by without looking in. The world didn't pause or change its rhythm. That was something I had learned over the years. Things end quietly, most of the time. I looked up at the sign. In the daylight, it looked older than I remembered. The letters were faded unevenly. One corner was slightly crooked. I remembered standing across the street at 18, watching it go up, feeling like I had anchored myself to something solid. Now, it felt like the sign was watching me instead. Like it had stayed long enough to see me grow into someone else. I thought about taking it down myself. I thought about leaving it up for a while. In the end, I did neither. I left it exactly as it was, hanging there, doing nothing, pointing to a place that no longer needed to be found. There was something tragic about that, but not in a dramatic way. It wasn't loud or sharp. It was quiet, like a sentence that ends without punctuation. The sign didn't fall. It didn't break. It just stayed, holding onto a meaning that had already passed. As I walked away, I didn't look back right away. I focused on the sound of my footsteps, the feeling of the ground beneath me. I had spent so many years standing still inside that space that moving forward felt unfamiliar. I realized then that most of my adult life had been measured in store hours. Opening times, closing times, slow afternoons and busy mornings. Without them, the day felt wider, less defined. I didn't feel relief and I didn't feel regret. Mostly, I felt quiet, like the store had taken some of the noise with it when it closed. Later, I would remember small things. The way the light fell across the floor in the late afternoon. The sound of the doorbell. The way the sign outside cast a shadow on the sidewalk at certain times of day. None of it felt heavy. It felt complete. I opened the store at 18 thinking it would teach me how to run a business. Instead, it taught me how time works, how things don't usually end all at once, how they fade, slowly, until one day you realize you're standing at the door for the last time, turning the key just a little further than usual. The sign is probably still there now, fading a little more each day. Watching people pass without knowing what it once meant. I like the idea of that. Something remaining even after its purpose has changed. That feels close enough to a goodbye.